Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Center Presents. Before we start, just telling you about two upcoming programs next week on the 27th of July. The Center Presents program is called Raoul Wallenberg. It's presented by Judith Price. Judith Price has been a resident of Eastman for 40 years as a part-time resident, and she is presenting this program because she was a survivor of the Holocaust as a baby, her and her mother, and she said she owes her life to Raoul Wallenberg. He was a Swedish diplomat who saved many Jewish people from the concentration camps and the ghettos in Budapest, and she's here to tell his story and her story. That's next Wednesday evening. On August 10th, William Gazy is being presented, classic guitarist. He has played with orchestras, chamber societies, the opera, film, TV, theater, you name it, he's played with them. He lives in West Lebanon, and he will come here to entertain us, and that's on August 10th. And tonight now, I'm very happy to present our program. It's entitled Star Power, the Astrological Approach to Health and Wellbeing, and it's being presented by Leslie McGuirk, who is also an Eastman resident. She lived on Snow Hill many years ago as a child. And she has now moved back from Florida. So according to her today, this heat is nothing. Anyway, Leslie is an internationally acclaimed astrologer. And she has this unique ability to map the ways of the alignment of the planets and the stars and how they impact life's journey. So we are all looking forward to tonight. So please welcome Leslie.
Thank you so much. You guys hear me okay? Yeah. All right, good. I want you to know that being an astrologer was the last thing in the world I ever wanted to be. In fact, I would say I would have been running in the opposite direction. I spent most of my life as a writer and an author of children's picture books, illustrator as well, and I was a designer for Takashimaya, the Japanese department store. And astrology was just something I did in the background because when I was 19, my mom, I grew up in Bronxville, New York, where astrology was not part of the vernacular. She said, I want you to meet this woman who's an astrologer. I think she could really help you. I think that was her nice way of saying, I think you're really messed up and maybe she'll have some answers for you. So I went to Greenwich Village and I met this woman who had this strange looking pattern on a piece of paper, and she said, oh my God, you are so talented, you're so creative. What are you doing with your life? And I said, nothing. I was always told I couldn't draw, that I couldn't write, that I didn't have any creative abilities. And she basically, I felt like she took me by the scruff of the neck and just put my body up there in the air and said, you have got to do what your chart tells you to do, because otherwise you'll be like a crazy person looking for love and adventure in all the wrong places. And she said you could end up on the back of a Hells Angels motorcycle. Like, she was like saying this, which is really funny because at one point I actually dated a professional motorcycle racer. But anyway, so if anyone in this room doesn't believe in astrology, I think that's fantastic. How many of you know nothing about it and think that it's probably ridiculous? You can tell me the truth. Yes, good. I'm so happy. You're right to feel that way because most people have never been taught what it is, and they have no idea how incredibly important it can be for human beings. So that's what this talk is about, and my invitation tonight is for you to believe nothing that I'm going to tell you, but entertain the possibility that I might be right, okay? So let's start with a little introduction about what astrology is, and first of all, let me just make sure I've got So we as human beings, we live on this earth and we're connected to things that are above us and things that are below us. We're connected to the earth, we're connected to the oceans. But we've tended to forget that we're connected to the cosmos, what's above our head. And I believe that when 9/11 happened, we had an instantaneous shift. We were living in a very horizontal framework where medicine and life and everything was going along in a certain kind of way, and then all of a sudden this COVID thing hit, and all of a sudden we flipped and we're in this vertical axis. And we are now, I believe, entering a time when we have to be more connected to the natural rhythms of this universe, including the earth rhythms and also the planetary rhythms. If you just look at the moon, which is a rock in space, it's regulating every single body of water on this earth. So the tides go up and down according to the cycles of the moon, and our bodies are like 80, 90% water. So if anyone ever says, well, I don't believe in astrology, that's like saying, well, the moon doesn't have any influence on what's going on down on this earth. And there's an influence. I do not believe in astrology as fortune telling. That's super scary. I don't believe in horoscopes. That's not what I do at all. I believe more in something that I call human design, that we're actually born with an imprinting system into our beings, and a good astrologer can just read that, but I don't believe anyone can predict the future. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that that's not at all what I'm about. So what is astrology? So the word, it comes from the Greek, and it's a combination of two Greek words, but it's basically just the study of the stars. And it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And people, when they didn't have television or cell phones, what did they do for their entertainment? They'd lie outside and look at all these passing planets and constellations moving around in the sky. Oops, went the wrong way, sorry. So most people don't realize that the three wise men who found baby Jesus, the word magi actually means astrologer. Those three wise men were astrologers, and in very many ancient cultures all over the planet, astrologers were considered right under the kings, and they were considered very high level. And in China, the astrologers were way up here, and then under them were the Tai Chi Qigong masters, and under them were the massage therapists, people who move your chi. So now it's all flipped. Most people have a massage therapist, or they take Tai Chi classes, but hardly anyone goes to an astrologer, because first of all, there aren't that many that are that good at it, because it's been so regulated or relegated into the world of fortune telling that we've actually lost a lot of the incredible magic and the science, esoteric science of what astrology is. So the medieval stargazers were considered the wise men, and it started in Babylonia about 600 BC, so it's been around for a very long time. And if you travel anywhere in the world, you will see a whole gigantic cultural, artistic sense of how important these patterns that were in the skies were to human culture. So this is just an idea of these maps of the heavens. And we tend to forget that a lot of our language is actually derived from this cosmos. Like the word lunatic comes from the word lunar, which is the moon. And one of the most interesting things in terms of language, if you look at Saturn in astrology language, it's the planet that deals with hardship and difficulties and tough lessons. And every single word in the dictionary that has an ST in it relates to what Saturn means in someone's chart. So struggle, stamina, strength, strong. If you throw out any ST word, it's where you get tested. So Saturn, the ST words are actually, it's part of our human nature to continue the trend of what people did thousands and thousands of years ago. But we tend to not think about these things. It's not part of what anyone's talking about these days. So these early people were using the sextant. They could figure out how to navigate. So think about all the early seagoers. How did they get around? They used the stars, right? And if you look at astrology as simply a mapping system, then it starts to become something very different than what you walked in this room thinking about, that it's your horoscope and that I'm into fortune telling. That's not at all what it is. It's just a navigational tool. So even this moth, I don't know how to pronounce that, but anyway, he even finds his ways using the stars. So I was invited to give a talk on astrology on a Paul Gauguin cruise ship in French Polynesia right before the COVID thing happened. And I did a lot of studying about the navigators there in Polynesia before I took this trip. And they were some of the most advanced people around how to navigate. And so when the Europeans came, they had all their technical things that they had developed to navigate, but they found that the French Polynesians were much more advanced, and it's because they were much better at reading the stars and understanding the patterns of nature. So the Earth is the rock in space that's basically circling around the sun, and those star formations are the zodiac signs, and the word zodiac means wheel of animals. And when a baby is born, basically what an astrologer is doing is looking at the mapping, the navigational imprinting mapping system of what was above your head when you took your first breath. So if you're born in China, you're going to have a very different chart, even if it's the exact same day and time as someone born in New York City, because this is constantly in motion, and that's why time of birth is so important. So if you look at, just even in New York City, how many of you have been to Grand Central Station? Have you looked at the ceiling? There's the ceiling. It's all about the zodiac signs. There are many, many buildings in New York. This is also from New York City. That's the sign of Sagittarius, the archer. And that's the Morgan Pierpont Library in New York. Those are all the zodiac signs. Many, many buildings in New York, Penn Station, all of these are in New York. That's not New York, but what I want to tell you is that this language, and that's really what astrology is, it's a language. That's all it is. It's like Japanese, and it's a way of explaining the way I believe that people are designed, and it's ancient. And think about acupuncture about 50 or 60 years ago. What did people think of acupuncture? They thought it was crazy, right? Okay, we're going to put a little needle in your foot and it's going to help your throat. That was not considered part of the medical system, all right? But I'm going to tell you tonight about the work I'm doing with doctors, because astrology is even more powerful than acupuncture, but they're both super useful, fantastic. And just like acupuncture, you could go to 20 acupuncturists and get a different result. You could go to 20 astrologers and get a different result. So it's an interpretive art. It's not hard science. It's what I call esoteric science. So Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, he literally said, a physician without a knowledge of astrology has no right to call himself a physician. It is more important to know what sort of person has, it's more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. So back in the day, most people don't realize that you couldn't get a medical license unless you knew how to read an astrology chart. And right now, I'm working with the head of integrative medicine at NYU, and you can say, how the heck did that happen? I did not go looking for it, but I've been teaching for the last 20 years at Rancho La Puerta, which is a spa in Mexico. And I was giving this talk on astrology, and in the audience was the head of integrative medicine at NYU. And what I did in that workshop is I actually moved people around the room according to how they think and how they use language, which is different than your sun sign. Everybody knows their sun sign, but that's not interesting to me. That's like saying you're a Chevrolet, but I don't know if you're a truck or a sedan. It doesn't mean anything. But Mercury is the planet of communication. I can move people around the room according to their type of how they use language. So anyway, he watched all this and he said, wow, that was really interesting. You were very accurate. He said, are you telling me that you can read a person's pattern and imprinting system and help them with health issues? I said, absolutely. So he said, all right, game on, let's try this experiment. So what he started to do was send me his patients, and I said, well, here's how we have to do this. You cannot tell me their first name or their last name. I don't want their email address or their phone number. You're just going to give me their birth date, time, place of birth, I'm going to do up their chart. I'm going to meet them on a free conference line number so I can't track them. Because I wanted him to know with 100% certainty that I did not Google them or do any background research on them. So he started sending me all his most impossible patients, the ones that nobody could help. The first one I dealt with, in 1 hour, I knew exactly what was the matter with her and how she needed to be helped. And he heard this recording and he said, oh my God, he said, you weren't even wrong about anything about her. I can't believe what you just figured out. We've been trying to help this woman for 6 years. So she's now one of my biggest fans. So we kept going, patient after patient. And I recently gave a talk with him at the spa in Mexico. But guess what's happening, which is really quite sad. He's nervous that people are going to think he's crazy, even though he can't deny that this has been helpful. So he's hoping that one day enough people will have proof that astrology is a useful tool. That's all it is. Want to make it really clear. I am never predicting somebody's future. I am not trying to do fortune telling. I don't believe in that. I don't think it's healthy. That's not what it is at all. I call astrology the language of compassion, because if you can figure out the way a person is designed, then you can be at peace with that, and you can say, oh, okay, I wouldn't get mad at a giraffe for having a long neck, so why would I get mad at a person for having a particular tendency? So I think it's one of the best things in the world for humans to know about. Think about how useful this is for families, for children, health issues that you can't figure out, or even in businesses, helping with people with how they communicate with each other. And once you understand the way people are designed, then it becomes a lot easier. And I use also dogs as a metaphor for people all the time. So if you have a basset hound, they have little short legs, and you have a greyhound. The greyhound will beat the basset hound any day of the week, right? That's just the way it is. That's the way astrology works. We're looking at the style and the design of a human system. Okay. So body parts were connected to different zodiac signs back when astrology and medicine was connected. And right now, I'm actually working with a bunch of neurologists. My favorite thing to do right now is to teach people how to read astrology charts, because I believe that having this knowledge, even if you're not going to become a master at it, there are certain basic things that you could learn that can be very useful. But neurologists have heard about my work, and what's really interesting about neurologists is that they're all into this neuroplasticity. How many of you know about that? Yeah, so it's all about like sort of breaking patterns, and I believe astrology is like astroplasticity, that there's a way that you can have this system, this chart, this human design, and you're supposed to outgrow it. You're not supposed to stay stuck with the negative patterns. The chart is there for you to learn from, but not to get stuck in it. And a lot of it's about breaking the patterns. So again, a lot of ancient medical and astrological things with the body. So this is the problem. Magazines have horoscopes. They should be called horror, H-O-R-R-O-R, horoscopes. There's nothing about this that has anything to do with what I do or what Hippocrates was talking about, or Carl Jung. He didn't look at a single patient without looking at their astrology chart. How many people knew that? So any Jungian therapist is using astrology. So this has not been helpful. And this did not help either. Nancy Reagan with the astrologies, this is very, what would they call it? The strange story. What a shame. Became sort of a joke, astrology in the White House. So she says, why take chances? It may be nonsense, but does anybody really know? And people have certainly been fascinated by astrology for thousands of years. The only true statement in that is the last part. People have been fascinated by astrology. Now, it's not nonsense. I mean, I would not be working with doctors getting the kind of results that I'm getting if it was nonsense. So that was a tragic thing that happened. This is by Donald Reagan. He said every move and decision the Reagans made during my time in the White House was cleared in advance with a woman in San Francisco who drew my horoscopes. This is not healthy. Like, people always ask me all the time, Leslie, are you looking at your horoscope to see what's going to happen in the next week or two? And I said, no, I don't care. I'm living my best life. I'm not going to let some planets up there determine what I'm going to do with my life. That's not what I'm about, and it doesn't really interest me. So I want you to understand that that's something very different. So right now, this was pretty recent, 2019, the New Yorker magazine did a big article on astrology in the age of uncertainty. So if you're interested in reading about how it's really shifted in the last couple of years, because the younger generation is obsessed with astrology. So a lot of venture capitalists are putting money into astrology. And it's these millennials. If you go to any bar in New York City, if you don't know your sun sign, your rising sign, and your moon sign, that nobody even wants to talk to you. So about 25% of Americans believe in it, but here's what's really interesting. Almost 100% know their sun sign. So everyone in the room knows their sun sign, right? Does anyone here in this room not know their sun sign? You don't know what your sun sign? Okay, interesting. You guys are unusual. Has anyone heard of co-star? Does anyone know what co-star is? You know what co-star is? So it's an app, and it's got it raised over $5 million, but it's got millions and probably billions of followers right now. So even Benjamin Franklin knew that astrology was one of the most ancient sciences and held in high esteem of old by the wise and the great. So if you think about nature, that everything has a pattern, this is just what I call my little lifesaver cactus plant in Florida. So everything has a design to it, whether it's a tree trunk, a snowflake. What makes us think we're any different than anything else in nature? I mean, we have a pattern, we have a design. And our design is basically a map of what was above our head at the minute we took our first breath. So the solar system, all those planets, think about how amazing they are. They're always going the exact same speed. They never bounce around. There's a complete ordered system. And there was actually an article in The Economist magazine in 2017 about Jupiter. This was not an article proving or disproving astrology, but it was talking about how the planet Jupiter, you can measure the electromagnetic frequencies coming off of that planet on Earth. And so what I'm proposing to all of you tonight is to think that, is it possible that when you take your first breath, you're actually imprinted with an electromagnetic pattern, nothing more, nothing less, and that pattern can be a bit like your song that you're born with. So some people are born with classical music in their system and some are rap. Everyone's different. But is there anything positive or negative about music? No. Some are really complicated. Some are really simple, like lullabies that put you to sleep. And some of them are, everything's different. There's nothing good or bad about it. So when you're born, basically the staff, the musical staff, is a lot like the astrological wheel. And the planets are like the musical notes, and they plop into the system. So what we're looking at as an astrologer, we're looking at the sacred geometry of where everything was at the moment of birth. And a good astrologer is just reading your harmonics. There's no fortune telling involved. However, I can predict that if you have two parents who are born like classical music and you're rap music, I'm going to predict you're going to have a tough childhood. Because that's just not easy. It's not good or bad, it's just not easy. So that's like the wheel, the astrological wheel. That's like the staff of music. You plop that up into the sky and you put all the planets and all the zodiac signs in there. And then an astrologer is just reading the language of the music of the spheres. That's it. And I tell my clients that I'm 95% accurate. How could I be this accurate if it wasn't scientific? It is scientific, but it's an interpretive scientific art. It's not hard science. So there's astronomy, which is the study of the stars, and then there's astrology, which is the interpretive art of studying the stars. So they're different. So Carl Jung, as I said, he did not look at any single person's he looked at everyone's chart before helping them as a patient, and Carl Jung was friends with Freud, and Freud told him, you can't do this astrology stuff. People are going to laugh at you and think that you're crazy. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't stop. It's too accurate. So these are the different planets. So we think of the planets as actors, and they basically plop into that house system, which is a little bit like the board game Clue. How many of you played that when you were a kid? Okay, so think of that wheel, that empty wheel. It has 12 sections, like 12 rooms, and then the zodiac signs, the constellations, are like the background. They're like the interior designers for that house. And then the planets, these are the planets, they all plop into that house system. And the planets are like people. They're like actors. They're like Professor Plum and Colonel Mustard. So we have Mercury, the planet of how you speak and talk, which is what I wrote my book about. Jupiter, the planet of good fortune. Chiron, the wounded healer. We have Mars, the male energy. Neptune, the god of the underworld. The moon, mother energy. Pluto. And then we have the 12 zodiac signs. So every one of these plops into one of those zodiac signs. So Ralph Waldo Emerson said astrology is astronomy brought down to earth and applied towards the affairs of men. I mean, when you look at the number of really intelligent, wise humans that have lived on this planet, a lot of them have been very, very interested in astrology. The problem with astrology is that it got pushed into that category of the fortune-telling horoscope, Nancy Reagan stuff that unfortunately is not really what's happening, in my opinion, in a good way for astrology. So I want to tell you a couple stories in my astrology life that are just amazing, and this maybe will help you understand why I think astrology is so important. So I had these two, I used to live in Vero Beach, Florida, and I had this couple. They were very type A. They were both retired in their 40s, very wealthy, and they had a son who was 16, and he was lying on the couch every day, and he was a lazy son of a gun, and they were so disgusted with him, and they were so upset that their son was such a loser. They had tried therapy, they had tried everything, and they couldn't figure out how to help him. They did not believe in astrology, but they had heard about me, and they knew what I was doing with people, and they said, will you come over and at least take a look at his chart? So I did, and it was fascinating, because I had to look at the two parents. So the two parents were all very fiery. They were like Leo energy, Aries energy. What is fire like? They're aggressive. They want to burn up every tree in the forest. They want to move. They want to make things happen. And then the son, I look at his chart, and I was like, oh my gosh, everything in his chart was water. Fire and water do not get along very well, right? So I'm looking at this poor kid. The parents were basically evaporating him because he wasn't operating from their same, operating manual. So I said, the one thing you need to do with this child is you need to get him in the pool. Like, he needs to start swimming. Because I realized if you put him in his element, he will start to go fast, which is the only thing that fire people really care about, is speed and action and taking over and charging. They were very type A. And the parents laughed at me and they said, that's ridiculous, Leslie. He doesn't even barely know how to swim. He's 16. We're not going to do that. I said, just do me the huge favor. Just give it a try. The minute he gets in the pool, you're going to see what's going to happen. Within a year, he was doing really well in high school with the swimming, and he was winning awards. Within 2 years, he was like state champion. And then he ended up getting into Tufts University because he was such a great swimmer, and he looked like a Greek god. And this kid was like so proud of himself, and his parents were so proud of him because finally he got to what he was actually capable of being and where his parents could appreciate him. And I don't know what would have happened to him if they hadn't called me. And I can tell you, hundreds of stories like this where every once in a while, just regular, straight Western medicine or Western way of thinking isn't going to give you the solution that you need, including many of these patients that Dr. Dennis Goodman at NYU has given me. He couldn't figure out how to help them. And in 1 hour, I'm like, I know, I get it. This is what's going on here with them. Once you get them on this path, then they're good to go. So I'm sure many of you have many questions right now. Do you? I could just talk for 8 hours about this. So does anyone have a question? Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Yes? Yeah.
Can you give an example of how you helped a patient, or what you saw and that he was grateful for?
You talking about the kid?
Mm-hmm.
What I saw in his chart?
Yeah, for a patient.
No, I think she means a patient, like health-wise.
Oh, what I saw?
Like for
okay,
health.
so I'll tell you, basically, I look at people using metaphors. So I think of people as cars. So some people are Lamborghinis, some people are Chevys, some people are Volvos. Everyone has 4 tires, right? When I'm looking at the chart, I think of the tires as being filled up with elements. There's fire, earth, air, and water. Most people are balanced, and they have all 4. When a person is missing an element, it's like they're driving around in a car that's got a problem. They're going to end up on the side of the road unless they put that element into their life with intention. And it will show up as a health issue. In my chart, I have absolutely no air in my chart, so I'm one of these people with a flat tire. So I've had sinus surgery twice in my life. I don't breathe really well. If you notice, since I've been talking here, I don't stop. Like I just go. Air is not my thing, but I have to really work at putting air into my life. So it can show up as a health problem too. So yeah, you have a question?
I just wanted to say something. I forgot to say it in the beginning, Leslie, that Nick is recording the program, so everyone knows it's being recorded.
Oh, so if you don't want to have your voice.
Yeah, I just want to let them know, and I want to thank Nick Kleinschmidt for recording it, and it will end up on YouTube eventually.
Okay.
But just so the audience knows, it is being recorded.
Okay, good. So you can also edit that out if you don't. Well, nobody can see you anyway. So. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but astrology is really, really complicated. I've been studying it since I was 19. I just turned, 62 the other day, so it's a long time to study something. And for me, like when I look at a chart, it's like I'm absolutely just reading a piece of music. And all I'm doing for my clients is letting them hear their musical score. And my job is to say, the drums are too loud, the oboe needs to come up, the flutes are too whatever. You got to just get it all kind of recalibrated. And once you do that, then you can be in flow. That's all that astrology is meant to do. And that's what the astrologer did to me when I was 19. She redirected me. And trust me, I needed it. I actually think she probably saved my life, for sure. Yeah, you have a question in the back?
Yeah, my question is that these charts, they're easy to formalize. Let's say at this moment, at that moment, the stars were positioned in that way. So this is easy to formalize, but from that point further should be, what I understand, is more like an art to interpret this. So can you elaborate on this?
So you're 100% right. So pretend you're driving your car. You're born with your car, and you have an owner's manual in your car glove compartment. That is your natal chart. That's never going to change. That's just your owner's manual. That's all we're looking at. But we are under the influence of cosmic weather patterns all the time. I was on Coast to Coast Radio 6 months before COVID hit, and I actually predicted that something was coming down the pike that was going to turn our life upside down. And George Norrie, who was interviewing me, said, well, what do you think it is, Leslie? I said, I don't know, because I don't predict the future, but I can tell you from the weather pattern that it involves the element of air. So I knew, and the virus is airborne, it's invisible like air, it affects the lungs. So we have our owner's manual, we're driving our car, but we also have these influences that are going on right now. Like even this year, we have a lot of things going on there. This is not an easy time on this planet, as everyone knows. And we are influenced every single day by full moons and by all sorts of things that are going on. Does that make sense? So there are two things that are happening. It's not just our own natal chart, it's the weather that's going on. And then there's also other people that are interacting with us. So it's like, you're yellow, I'm blue. You put us together working on a project, we turn into this green color. There's a whole other level of life that happens. So it's complicated. It's not just simply just your natal chart. Does that make sense? Okay, yes?
Can you give other examples of people you've looked at and helped?
Okay, so there's so many, but the one that comes to mind that is one of my happy favorite stories is this woman. that I met in Mexico at the spa where I teach, and she was in her 60s, and she was probably about 50 pounds overweight. She told me at breakfast that she had had gastric bypass surgery. She told me that she lived with her mother and that she rescued cats. Okay, just to give you the background of this. So when I get home, she wanted a reading, and I remember her. Normally, I don't see my clients. I don't want to see what they look like. I don't want to know anything about them. So I do her chart, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm looking at this chart, and what I saw on the chart did not match what I saw in Mexico. And I told her, I said, look, you are a really sexual person, and you're supposed to be with somebody, and you're supposed to have this really exotic, amazing, incredible life. And from what I heard from when you were in Mexico, that wasn't exactly happening. And she said, you're right, I haven't had a date or a guy in my life for 30 years. And I was like, okay. So then I looked at her weather. Getting back to your question, I looked at what was going on in her life at that moment, and I saw that she was under the perfect timing, the perfect aspect to find love and to totally change this whole chart around to this delicious, yummy, incredible, sensual life. And so I decided to look at something called an astrocartography map, which is very, very interesting. It's a map of the world that tells you the best places to go. And I saw, she lived in Seattle, and I saw right through Cuba, she had this Venus line for love. And I said, you need to get yourself a cute outfit and go to Cuba. And I knew when I said that she thought I was crazy. So a year passes, and then she types me this email, and I still have it if anyone wants to see it, so I can prove that it's true. She said, Leslie, that reading was really good, except for all that crazy stuff you talked about going to Cuba and finding love. And she said, you won't believe it. I ended up going to Cuba. Somebody invited me, and when I was there, I met this guy who lived 10 miles from me in Seattle. We fell madly in love, and we now live together. So isn't that a great story? I have like many stories like that. This map of the world, the astrologer who saved my life when I was 19, she told me to get this map, and I've traveled everywhere except for Africa. And the line that goes right through Tokyo, Japan, is where I should go for fame and fortune. And that's where I became famous as a designer. I was selling t-shirts out of the back of my car in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And then I became a famous designer in Japan. I have traveled many, many places on this map. And the one place that I wanted to go to was Bali. And I saw that there was very bad aspects there. And I thought, I am not living my life by this stupid map and astrology. So I went to Bali, and the lines that were there were for accidents, and I had a very terrible accident that happened to me there. I had a neck injury that I still deal with, but it's a lot better now. But I don't mess with that map anymore, and I don't mess with astrology either. Astrology never lies. My clients, they will try to lie to me all the time. And I just sit and wait until, usually the sessions are about an hour, and then about 50 minutes in, they'll say, well, Leslie, maybe this is what happened to me when I was a kid that was so bad. And I'm like, yeah, I think being locked in the trunk of your car for fun, by your uncle. I hear horrible things. I'm not going to tell you the horrible stories, so I'm going to keep it happy tonight. Yes, you have a question?
How does one go about getting an astrological interpretation?
With me or with anybody you're talking about?
Either or.
Okay. Well, you can go to my website, and you have to kind of apply to get a reading with me. So there's a bit of a waiting list. I think right now I'm booked into November. But yeah, it's hard. I actually can't advise you about any other astrologers, but I don't really hang out with astrologers. I don't really know them, many of them. I've been to some astrology conferences, and I'm sort of an outlier. And one of the most amazing things, my book, I've got 20 children's picture books that I've published, and had never done an astrology book. But I went, again, to Mexico where I was teaching, and I gave my first talk on astrology there. And back then, I wasn't a practicing astrologer. I didn't have a website, I didn't have a business card, and in the audience was this well-known literary agent. She came up to me afterwards. She said, Leslie, forget children's books. I want to be your agent, and I want you to do your first adult book about astrology. I said, whoa. I said, I don't even have this as a profession. I don't know what you're talking about. Within 2 years, she sold my book to HarperCollins, which I don't know if you know anything about publishing. That's almost impossible. The reason why it happened is because my particular chart that I live with, my owner's manual, the higher version of my chart is for me to be a healer and a teacher. I didn't really want to do that, but as long as I keep giving and be of service in that way, things in my life work out a lot better. So I have to follow my own owner's manual all the time too. Yes?
How does this book fit into the whole nature versus nurture dynamic?
It's both, because if you have a child who has a tendency towards depression, then if you have that and then you have parents who don't really understand that, it's going to make it worse. So it's very complicated. It's not, just think of it like a dog. A dog is designed to be a particular way, but if you put it with one family, it's going to grow up to be very different than if you put it with another family. So that's definitely part of it. Does that make sense? The environment that you're in will influence it. Yeah, so my particular chart, if I had not met that astrologer, I might not be standing here right now, because my chart is gnarly. When it's good, it's really good, and when it's bad, it's really bad. So she helped redefine how I kind of looked at myself and got me on the right path. And she literally said last night, the path you can go on is about this big. Most people have a path about that big. So because of meeting her, it probably totally changed the trajectory of my life. So that was a huge influence. Yes?
So you started out by saying that it's not about fortune telling.
Right.
But from everything that you're saying, it does sound like you can say to people, you need to move more on this path.
Because it's no different than what I would say to a horse or a donkey. Like a racehorse is designed for the Kentucky Derby. A donkey is not made for that. I'm just telling you how you were designed, that you do better in this way. Or a car, a Lamborghini is designed for a very different life than a Jeep. I'm not predicting the future. I'm just saying you're designed for this. So if you do what you're designed for, your life will be easier. Does that make sense?
So you're not telling people exactly
No.
what they need to do.
No.
Or this path is
This path.
better for you. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if you put yourself in places where you have a better chance for success, like for me it's Tokyo, Japan, or for that woman it was Havana, Cuba. It just, if you want to speed up the process, why not, right? To make it easy. I'm all about, if it's not easy, I don't want it. I want it to be easy. And if there's a way, this planet is wicked hard. So if there's a way to make things easier, then I'm happy. Margaret, you had a question? No, okay, you had a question, sorry.
Why is the moment of your birth the magical time and maybe not the time that you're conceived or the day before?
Because remember that picture I showed you of all the planets twirling around? Everything's in motion. Okay, so it's just taking a picture at the moment, the second you took your breath. 10 minutes later, everything's moved. It's not the same. It's constantly moving. So that's why time makes a difference. So with twins, somebody could say, okay, what about twins? Why are they like to have totally different lives? I'll explain that with using cars as a metaphor. So pretend you have two red Mercedes that come off the assembly line. They have almost identical owner's manuals. They look the same, they act the same. But the difference is you have a driver, and the drivers are deciding what's going to happen with that car. One car could end up parked on the street all its life and look like a mess after 10 years. The other one is meticulously cared for, and it looks beautiful after 10 years. The owner's manuals are the same. The car is exactly the same, but very different outcomes because you have free will. You're in charge of your chart. The astrologer is not in charge of your chart. The astrologer is just saying, this is what I would do if I was you with this beautiful car that you've got. So that's all I'm doing. I'm trying to get the most positive, happy outcome for people. Does that make sense? Okay.
Well, no, I had that question too. Why do you choose that as to be the important time, the imprint, as opposed to when you were conceived or some other time frame?
I don't have the answer to that. It's a good question. I mean, there's also very different, like in India, there's Vedic astrology, which is a totally different system. The astrology that I use is just what I've been trained in, and and I know how to operate that.
It's a historical
yes.
growth of knowledge that
yes.
you're taking advantage of.
Yes.
And that's the understanding.
Yes, exactly. And astrology, like I said, it's a language. It's a language of human design. And we're just describing the way human beings are designed. And I mean, I could talk to you for hours about a lot of famous people that their designs are fascinating to understand why they are the way they are. Okay, Margaret, I have a question.
So if someone was going to have a C-section, could they come to you and say,
yes,
it's the best time to have a C-section?
Yes, they do that. I get really uncomfortable with that, but yes, they can. Yeah, I don't like that, but yeah, they can do that. Absolutely. Yes.
Can you explain how the stars and the planets create attributes? I mean, I don't understand the connection.
Okay, remember I told you about that article in The Economist magazine about Jupiter, that there's an electromagnetic frequency that can be measured? So we are basically electromagnetic beings. You can go get an EKG, talk to any heart doctor. We're electromagnetic. We have a pattern, so think of it as music. An astrologer is just reading the way you're designed, the way you're created. Like anything, like I said, a giraffe has a different design than an antelope. So you have a different design than somebody sitting here in the front row. It's electromagnetic patterns that we're reading. In my opinion, that's how it works. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I don't understand how this could be anything but scientific. If I'm as accurate as I am with people, there has to be something to it that's based in science. But again, it's an interpretive science, like acupuncture. So you could say the same thing, like, why is it that you put a needle in your toe and it's going to help your lower back? What is that about? I mean, astrology is just as weird as that in some ways. But now, acupuncture is recognized by the medical community. Someone else have a question? Yes.
So then there's also your DNA and your genetics and everything.
Well, that's fascinating. That shows up on the chart too. Like if somebody has alcoholism in their chart or depression, I can see which side of the family it came from. And what I often like to do is look at generational charts back. So you'll see the same patterns that grandchild, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. You see the same thing. It keeps going down. They all have the exact same patterns. It's fascinating. So the genetics, the DNA of it all is right there. It's wild. It's like going into some, deep rabbit hole of fascinating. Once you get hooked into astrology, it's hard to ever come out of it. So if anyone's ever interested in taking my classes, I do them online, and that's like my new obsession is in 8 hours, I can get people up and running to the level that I was at after 20 years of study. So that's pretty cool. Because I want to be able to have anyone look up their child or their grandchild's chart and say, oh, I see what's going on here. That's why they are the way they are. To me, that would be a great gift for humanity if we could do that. Yes?
What if you don't know your time day that you were born?
It's a little bit of a problem. There's something called rectifying a chart where you kind of back into it by asking very weird questions to try to figure out where everything was. But it's 75% accurate without a birth time, but it's still useful. There are a lot of people, not a lot, but there are people who don't even know what day they were born. Like little Chinese girls who were left at hospitals on the street, or people in the Middle East. They don't even know when their birthday is. Yeah. Yes, Jane.
Hi, Leslie. I have a question. I don't understand the connection between somebody's DNA and somebody's astrology chart. Because somebody just asked you that question, and how do they connect?
I don't really know if I can scientifically answer that. All I know is that the patterns that a human being has, especially traumatic or emotionally difficult things, they usually come through either the mother or the father's bloodline. And so there are patterns that are inherited. I don't understand it, but I'm not sure I can answer that question. All I know is that I think our job is to stop the negative patterns. I think we come in to outgrow our chart we're not supposed to stay stuck looping in the same behavior, the same trauma over and over again.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of EMDR therapy. Does anyone know what that is? Yeah, so I use EMDR with astrology to get people to the fastest level of being healthy, because EMDR, for those of you who don't know what it is, it stands for eye motion desensitization reprocessing. It's when your eyes go left, right, really fast, or you have paddles in your hand that go beep, 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 and you have a headset on that goes beep, 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 beep. When you bilaterally stimulate your brain while you're thinking of trauma, it actually goes into the brain and it finds in the brain where the trauma was, and it shifts it so you don't keep looping in it. So we're a lot like, records. When you have the record get stuck in a groove, you hear the same song over and over again. The only way to stop it is to lift up that needle and to get it to stop skipping in the same song. That's what EMDR does. It interrupts the pattern. So EMDR is super helpful, and I think it's far more successful than talk therapy. Talk therapy is like bringing your car into the shop and talking about all the things that are wrong with it, but it never actually fixes it. And I think EMDR is like going to the mechanic who actually goes and says, we need to fix that in the brain and get that rewired. There's a really wonderful guy named Dr. Andrew Dobo, who's an EMDR therapist. He's written a book. There are a lot of videos that I've actually interviewed him about EMDR and how it works. When he started off his practice, he didn't know about astrology, and I sent so many people to him that he will, to this day, credit me with making his career huge, because I can't fix anybody, but a therapist can take what I've seen and help them, because my area of expertise is actually trauma. I have a weird ability to see trauma. And a lot of times people, especially anyone who had surgery under the age of 5, they have PTSD, usually undiagnosed. And a lot of times children will minimalize trauma and think it wasn't that big a deal, when in fact it really was, because they don't have the language to understand it. I see that a lot. And then once you figure out what that is, then you go to an EMDR therapist, clear it out, and then you don't keep looping. Because otherwise you'll just keep making the same mistakes, same pattern over and over again. Any other questions? Did anyone come in out of this feeling a little differently about astrology? Maybe a little bit? Yeah. Jane, you have a question?
I did. No.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did.
You did, all right, good.
I didn't. I learned a lot.
That's all I want people to be open to the idea that there is actually something out there, a tool. That's all this is. It's just a tool that can really help people. And I've just seen too many people benefit from it, including myself. So that was the goal for tonight, was to just share my passion for this amazing ancient wisdom that, again, most people think is just horoscopes, but if I changed your mind even a little bit tonight, that I'm a happy person. Yeah, question, Kathy?
I'm standing up there. You see the chart. Can anybody else read their own chart, or do you have to have a professional read your chart?
No, if you took my class, you could read your own chart. But I don't like reading my chart. I mean, I get my friends I have one friend who's an astrologer. I'll ask him questions all the time, but I don't like looking at my own chart. I can't look at my family's charts. It's like looking at them with no underwear on. Like, it's not pleasant. I don't want to look. Like, I had both my parents' charts. I'm like, ugh, I don't want to go there. I don't want to It's very funny. You just see too much, you know. I'm not sure I answered your question. Yes, Courtney.
Doing this for so long, do you feel that there's somehow an innate sense in you that when you meet somebody, you can just tell right away, oh, I wish this person would just let me read their charts thinking help, or something? Can you sense it in people that are either on the right path or that are not on the right path, like to somebody who would really need it versus somebody who's probably doing okay?
Yeah, I think a lot of people put up a good front, but I think a lot of people are really hurting. All I know is that I do not like reading charts for people who didn't want it to be read. Like, people who give it to someone as a gift, I won't accept it. I don't do that. No, you have to want it. If you don't want it, you don't want to walk into the giant truth serum coming at you like I did. No, you don't want to have a reading with me. So yeah, you have to want it. You have to want to get better too. If you want to stay stuck, do not call Leslie for an astrology reading. Right, Carol? I've known Carol. By the way, thank you, Carol. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here tonight. She invited me to give this talk. So I've known Carol since I was 23. So yeah, I've been coming to Eastman since I was 12. Before the lake was enlarged, before the road around the lake was even made. So it was my family was one of the first people to come to Eastman long time ago. Yes?
I have a question in relation to autism. The incidence of autism now has increased exponentially.
Oh, yes.
Is there
see that.
anything to the balance of the astrological?
Oh, yes, there's a lot more autism. Yeah, and I can spot that in a chart a mile away. Yeah, that's a big thing. There's a lot of that. The other thing that's fascinating is that 1 out of every 3 women whose charts I look at has been sexually abused, which fits with the national average. 1 in 10 men has had sexual abuse, but 1 in 3 for women. And autism is definitely on the rise. Yeah.
But is there anything that's out of, like you explained, the wind, the fire, the water, is there anything that's out of balance
in the chart that causes that? Yeah, absolutely. But that would be complicated for me to explain using normal language, so I'm not going to try. But yeah, you can see it, and it's troubling. I will tell you, one of the most important books, if anyone has children, is to read the book Last Child in the Woods. Has anyone ever read that book? Yeah, one of the biggest problems we're having right now is called a nature deficit disorder. This is seriously bad. They're on the screens, they're on the phones, they're not connected to the rhythms of the earth. And so what I'm trying to suggest to people is, even if you don't believe in astrology, we are connected to these planetary influences and weather patterns. And astrologers are here to, in the old days, help the leaders of countries and to understand what's coming so they can deal with it in a healthier way. So, but I don't think anyone's listening to astrologers in high levels at the moment, but maybe one day that would be nice. Yeah, David.
So, aside from the time of birth, what are the other features or the factors that determine your chart?
Date, time, and place. Date, time, and place.
So your chart, once you establish that, it's fixed?
Fixed for life. Never changes. Think of it like the owner's manual in your car glove compartment. That never changes. But the minute you get married or get into a relationship with someone at work, whatever, then that person's chart is influencing your owner's manual. And then we have the cosmic weather that's going on right now. So you're driving your little car and you're fine with your little owner's manual, but what if the planetary effects are hitting you in a really difficult way? Then that's where astrology can really help too, because then you know you're not going crazy. Like, wow, this is a tough time, but it will pass. That's why right now the United States is going through a very difficult time. If you look at the birth chart of the United States, you can do charts for companies and countries. So July 4th, 1776. We're coming through right now what's called the Pluto return. Pluto's the planet of death and rebirth. It's right now up in the sky exactly where it was when our country was formed. So we're either going to make it or not. I don't know. But it's like there's something very profound happening at the moment. Yes?
We know that nowadays the doctors may determine the sick in the baby when it's in the mother. That the baby is sick. So the baby still didn't take the bread. And many times the doctor suggests abortion. Let's say Down syndrome, different levels. So I don't want to challenge, just how you can see the connections with this somehow relates to the DNA or the DNA changes, abdominal changes.
If the baby hasn't been born, I can't tell you anything because I wouldn't have a chart to look at. I wouldn't be able to tell. Yeah. Anyone else have a question? Yes.
If you were going to have one suggestion for all of us to start to get on this path, you know, the novices here, what would it be?
I would get a book by Caroline Casey called Inner and Outer Space. I think she's really good. She went to Brown University. She's an anthropologist. She's an astrologer. I think she's really good, really smart. I think that's a good place to start.
What is Inner and Outer Space?
Inner and Outer Space by Caroline Casey. I think she's probably one of the better astrologers. Also, I really like Stephen Arroyo, but he's written more advanced books. But if you're interested, the best thing to do is to take, you know, like a beginner's webinar with me and just get the basics. And then from there, once you get the basics of understanding astrology, then you can dig deeper and deeper. But remember, it's like learning Japanese, so it's not something that you have to just hear it a lot and then it starts to sink in. All right, good. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. It's a pleasure talking to you. And if anyone wants to be on my mailing list, you can. Yes, you have a question? What's your website? Just my name, LeslieMcGuirk.com. Very easy.
Thank
my
you,
partner.
Leslie. We really appreciate you taking time to come here.
Yeah, it's fun. Thank you.
Thank you.